Today we're talking Zambia. There's been a lot of drama in Zambia in the last week. What happened basically is that the financial community was caught off guard over the weekend. The president of Zambia, Edgar Lungu, dismissed the central bank governor, Daniel Kalyalya. This dismissal was a shock to everyone and it has had adverse impacts on the financial standing of Zambia in the international community. The ruling party, the Patriotic Front, says that Daniel Kalyalya was dismissed because of the poor disbursement of funds which were meant to stimulate the struggling economy. Because as you know, we're all going through COVID, and they argue that he didn't distribute funds on time. It's a bit of a questionable statement because Mr. Kalyalya's dismissal came barely 3 days after Zambia's central bank cut its benchmark lending rate by 125 basis points to try and safeguard the financial sector's stability and protect livelihoods in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. So he cut the rate to 8%. And in fact, Mr. Kalyalya was a respected former World Bank executive director. He was appointed in 2015 and his tenure was due to end in 2023. So this particular dismissal obviously comes relatively early and is something that would raise alarm. The main opposition leader in Zambia, Hakainde Hichilema, has called the sacking another sad development in Zambia's history. Some commentators have pointed out that the governor was going to be fired anytime soon because of his appearance in local media where he repeatedly warned about the dire state of the economy, and they say that's what led to his sack. So the decision to fire him in and of itself was a source of drama in the financial community because it was unexpected, it was early, and because he's a very respected member of the financial community. However, there is an additional element which added to this drama, and it comes from South Africa, and specifically from one of the prominent people on South African Twitter, Mr. Tito Mboweni, who is also the finance minister of the Republic of South Africa. So this is what he said. He said, presidents in Africa must stop this nonsense of waking up in the morning and firing a central bank governor. That was his first tweet. But he didn't stop there. This is not some fiefdom of yours, he said. Your personal property. No. That was his second tweet. Then the third tweet that he put out. The governor was a good fella. Why do we do these things as Africans? The president of Zambia must give us the reasons why he dismissed the governor, or else hell is on its way. I will mobilize. That was his third tweet on the topic. Then he had a fourth tweet, which was a bit more reflective, if you want to say. And this is what his fourth tweet said. It looks like I'm in trouble about my statement on the dismissal of the Bank of Zambia governor. I stand by my statement. Central bank independence is key. It's not negotiable. Let all central bankers speak out. That was his final tweet on the matter. All of these tweets have actually since been deleted, but they did raise the attention of the international community, and they did also raise the attention of the Zambian diplomatic community. So the Zambian information minister, Dora Silia, responded to Tito Mboweni's tweets. This is what she said. We are very surprised with Tito Mboweni's immature and improper criticism of a sovereign decision by Zambia. The minister should be attending to COVID problems facing the South Africans. We will pursue this matter diplomatically. That was the shot that was fired from the Zambian side. And then a few days later, the South African government, through its official Twitter account and also through a statement on their website, said the following. The president of South Africa, His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa, has strongly reprimanded the Minister of Finance, Mr. Tito Mboweni, following comments made by the minister on social media regarding the removal of Zambia's central bank governor by President Edgar Lungu. That was the statement from the South African government. And Tito Mboweni retweeted that particular statement. Then he put out a few other tweets to show that he was still feeling a little bit salty about everything. The first one he put out was Psalms 23 verse 4. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your soldiers, they comfort me. That was the first tweet that he put out after the reprimand, the strong reprimand. The second one was the dream deferred. Okay, maybe it explodes. Why? Because the best lack all conviction, whilst the worst are full of passionate intensity. Exclamation mark. Think. Then his last tweet on this matter was actually the following. William Ernest Henley, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. My head is bloody but unbowed. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. So that was what Mr. Tito Mboweni closed off his Zambian commentary on, that he is unbowed. He's bloody, but he's unbowed. And that added to all of the drama and attention that came from this particular decision. The impact of the decision itself is that the kwacha fell by 0.7% and is trading at 1:19 to the US dollar. The yield on the nation's euro bonds, which are due in 2024, surged to 30.34%, which is the biggest jump in those particular interest rates since April. So, having given you this dramatic turn of events, I think it's important to take it back a little bit and explain Zambia and specifically the financial challenges that are currently facing Zambia and why all of this may actually have happened. Let's break it down, let's review it, and let's make sure that it's digestible for you. That's what this show is all about. That's what this podcast is all about. And don't forget, if you love this podcast, find a space where you can review it, which is the Apple Podcast app, and rate it, and that will actually help others find it as well. So here's the gist on Zambia. It's officially the Republic of Zambia. It's a landlocked country in southern Central Africa. Its neighbors are the following: the Democratic Republic of Congo to the north, Tanzania to the northeast, Malawi to the east, Mozambique to the southwest, Zimbabwe and Botswana to the south, Namibia to the southwest, and Angola to the west. So you can see that this country is in the center of SADC. It's actually touching so many other countries. It's a critical country. The capital is Lusaka, and Lusaka is located in the south central part of Zambia. Zambia has a population of 17.4 million people. And here's what's significant about it economically. It's Southern Africa's third largest economy, and it's Africa's second largest producer of copper. And that copper is probably one of the things that has gotten Zambia into the kind of trouble that it has got into now. I'm going to talk about the copper a little bit later, but here's what the government and governance of Zambia is like. The head of state is the president, Edgar Lungu. The type of government that it is, it's a presidential republic. The legislature is a unicameral national assembly of 165 seats. Its economy is largely dependent on copper as its major exports, and this makes it very vulnerable to the fluctuations in the global commodities market. It has a high level of rural poverty and high levels of unemployment, and many people are still participating in agriculture as their form of economic activities. Its major trade partners are Switzerland, China, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Singapore, and South Africa. And its import partners are South Africa, the DRC, China, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates. That's the picture of Zambia. But Zambia is in a lot of trouble right now. They're in a lot of trouble because Zambia owes a lot of people a lot of money. Zambia is basically in debt distress. Now, debt distress is simply when an entity can no longer meet or pay its financial obligations because its revenues and income no longer suffice. And if it is now unable to meet those obligations, it becomes at a high risk of default and oftentimes receives a credit downgrade. So Zambia right now is in debt distress. But the question is, how do they get there? Zambia basically in 2006 only owed 217 million. By 2011, they now owed 1.9 billion US dollars. But in the last 9 years, that debt has jumped from 1.9 billion dollars to over 10 billion US dollars. So here's the breakdown of the debt. It owes 3 billion in euro bonds, which are outstanding. It owes 2 billion to commercial banks. It owes 2 billion to the IMF and the World Bank, and it owes 3 billion to China. Now, the Chinese debt is complicated because the 3 billion is only the tip of the iceberg, and I'll discuss that a little bit later. But over and above its euro bond debt, its foreign currency debt, it also owes, in a domestic level, almost 14 billion kwacha. So the total debt, when you convert that to US dollars, is close to 16 billion US dollars, and that represents 60% of their GDP. They are spending close to 30% of their budget servicing debt, and that's never a good situation for a country to be in. They have a high debt load and they're not doing well as things stand. That's where Zambia is. It's important for me to explain what is a bond and what is a euro bond, just so that it's clear. So a bond is a fixed income instrument that represents a loan made by an investor to a borrower. Typically, these loans are made by corporations or government. It's basically a loan from the public to the relevant institution. A bond can be thought of as an IOU between the lender and the borrower. Bonds are used by companies, municipalities, states, and sovereign governments to finance projects and operations. Owners of the bonds are debt holders or creditors to the issuer. Bond details include the end date when the principal of the loan is due to be paid to the bond owner, and usually includes the terms for variable or fixed interest payments made by the borrower. So some bonds are such that if things change materially on the ground, the interest rate goes up, and that could be as there's a higher risk of default, or as there are developments politically or in the company that make it less likely that the company will be able to pay back, or the government in and of itself. So that's a general bond loan, but there's a specific form of bond loan which is called a eurobond. A eurobond is a debt instrument that's denominated in a currency other than the home currency of the country or the market in which it is issued. Eurobonds are frequently grouped together by the currency in which they are denominated, such as the euro dollar or euro yen bonds. Since eurobonds are issued in an external currency, they are often called external bonds. Eurobonds are important because they help organizations raise capital while having the flexibility to issue them in another country. Issuance of eurobonds is usually handled by an international syndicate of financial institutions on behalf of the borrower, one of which may underwrite the bond, thus guaranteeing the purchase of the entire issue. So when we look at the Zambian scenario, we immediately realize that Zambia has a lot of debt. They are in a problem because they owe a lot of debt, and they owe it in international currency, and they're not necessarily going to be able to print money to solve that problem. And if you look at what has been happening, this is what the present challenge is from a currency perspective. There has been a sharp depreciation of the local currency. In 2005, the Zambian kwacha was trading at 1:5 with the US dollar. 1:5. That's an amazing rate for an African country. But in 2020, they're trading at 1:19.2. That's a massive depreciation in your currency. So if you hold foreign currency debt, it means that more of your money has to be used, of the money in circulation, to pay off that debt, because your money has literally lost value while the other currency has remained relatively stable. And in the instance of the US dollar, while it does fluctuate, it doesn't fluctuate at that kind of a dramatic rate where you can benefit as an African state. So that is a challenge that Zambia has faced. At the same time, the Zambian economy has been adversely affected by the decline in the price of copper. You know, at the beginning, I mentioned how they're heavily reliant on copper as an export. And when there is a dip in pricing, and we saw that even with oil, with countries that rely on oil for their exports, whenever the oil price crashes, that particular country is in an economic situation which is very, very precarious. So during this 2020 period, the demand for copper has inevitably gone down. This is because there's less industrial activity occurring in large parts of the world because they've been under lockdown. Imports have not been happening at the same rate, but also people are not offering high prices because they can negotiate you down. So what has happened is that the price of copper has gone down and Zambia has made less money as a result of that. So this has put them in a very tough situation because they owe China, they owe Europe, they owe several entities who want their money and who are increasingly worried that they're not going to get their money. And this is why you are seeing this tension between the president and the central bank governor, because the central bank governor is trying to keep the inflation low. He's trying to manage, the stability of the currency. He's trying to make sure that the country doesn't get into more debt. But the president needs money and he needs the kwacha to be flowing in the economy. And that may mean that there was likely some pressure being imposed on the central bank governor. But because he's somebody who was trying to operate within the international norms of finance, he was pushing back. And this is why you see Tito Mboweni coming in to kind of back him up, because they stand ideologically for a central bank being independent, being able to make its decisions without undue influence from politicians. And in fact, this is something that a lot of countries value. They don't value politicians being able to come and make demands around the printing of money, make demands which could adversely have an impact on the economy. And this is why you see that the ruling party says that the governor was not issuing money that was meant to stimulate the struggling country's economy. But at the rate at which the country is performing in terms of being in debt distress, low prices for copper and low demand for copper, printing more money would have accelerated the rate of inflation and the rate of currency depreciation. So there was a divergence of interest between the central bank and the administration. Having said that, it's important to understand that 2021 is an election year in Zambia, and that also could have a bearing on the dynamics between the central bank governor and the president. There's currently another fight that is happening in Zambia as we speak, and that fight is around how China will be paid for some of its project financing. So as things stand right now, China has been involved in the financing of massive infrastructure projects in Zambia. Some of those projects include the Tanzania-Zambia Railway. They also include the construction of a hydroelectric dam. And it also, funnily enough, includes China's stake in the Zambia national broadcaster. In 2017, Chinese media conglomerate Star Times funded the rollout of a migration to a new digital TV signal and now controls 60% of a joint digital venture with ZNBC called Topstar. And there are also massive road projects that the Chinese have been involved in working on with the Zambians. But Zambia has been defaulting on some of its payments, and they didn't pay back an Italian firm last year for some of their aerospace and defense procurements. So what has happened is that the Chinese contractors have actually started making demands, and the demands are such that rather than getting payment, they actually are asking for resource contracts and for control of entities. So here's what's happening. Chinese firms are seeking to capitalize on the liquidation of Konkola Copper Mines, which is a subsidiary of the London-based Vendetta Resources. And this is one of the large copper mines in Zambia. Chinese companies are seeking control over Glencore's Zambian operation Mopani, which may be heading towards a sale and is the country's largest producer. So it may be the case that what we are seeing in Zambia is a president who is worried that he may not be able to secure re-election in 2021 because his central bank governor is going to block, one, his access to short-term financing, which could come through quantitative easing, and two, a central bank governor who could be opposed to some of the restructuring of the development finance that Zambia has received because of his public utterances. Although that's not a competency which is within the Reserve Bank, it more is within the finance ministry, there is a correlation between those ministries, and he may not want somebody who can be a vocal opponent of his fiscal decisions as he's negotiating with the Chinese for them to take over critical copper mines as part of the refinancing of the debt that Zambia has to China. And you must be aware that debt is quite dramatic. China has a tendency of actually turning their project finance loans into a form of resource for infrastructure financing or a form of resource for collateral financing. So when they feel like you are at risk of defaulting, they start asking for more and more collateral. We saw this happen in Angola, we saw it happen in Djibouti, and we are seeing it happen in real time in Zambia. So while the drama centered around the Twitter shenanigans of Tito Mboweni, the story of what is happening in Zambia with its debt distress, with the Chinese seeking to attain resource for infrastructure, to attain more collateral for the debt that they are owed, it does clearly seem that Zambia is really in a tricky position. What do you think about the situation in Zambia? Do you think that President Lungu was justified to fire the Reserve Bank governor? Do you think that there's more to the story? Or do you think that Tito Mboweni was spot on in all of his criticisms? You can interact with us on social media with your interpretation of everything that has happened. And if you have a topic that you want to suggest that you think the podcast should cover, you can interact with us on Twitter as well. We're doing a t-shirt giveaway for some of the early listeners. So if you've listened to this podcast, slide into our DMs and tell us what size you want of your particular t-shirt. Thank you for listening. Till the next one.